Hello there, I'm Dimitra Feeney. I'm Professor of Fantasy and Children's Literature here at the University of Glasgow, and I'm also co-convener of the Fantasy MLitt programme.
And my name's Dr. Will Tattersdill. I'm the other co-convener of the Fantasy MLitt, and I'm Senior Lecturer in Literature and Contemporary Fantasy Cultures. So at Glasgow, we're very proud to have what we think is the only master's course in the world that is exclusively focused on fantasy literature. It's the jewel in the crown of the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic, which Dimitra will tell you about in a minute. And it is the centerpiece of a large community we have of researching and teaching fantasy literature across the university. So on this slide, you can see the things that you have to do if you take this course. So the core of it is these two not optional courses, Fantasy 1 and 2, that run either side of Christmas, and broadly speaking are designed to introduce students to fantasy from about 1780 to the present day. It's changed a lot during that time. These courses can only scratch the surface of what's been done with the genre over that amount of time, but our hope is to give everyone some common ground, to introduce some common approaches to the subject, and to broaden the horizons of anybody perhaps who's coming in with a very niche view in terms of period or author of what it is that fantasy can do. On top of that, we have the research training course. Every literature master's student takes that, so this is not a fantasy specific course, it's a research skills course, and it's designed to give you the practical skills that you need to do the fourth and final of these compulsory courses, which is the dissertation. The dissertation is the last and the biggest and the most independent thing that you will do here. You'll do it on any subject related to any aspect of fantasy. You choose it yourself. You may have ideas already. You might develop those ideas across taking the other courses in conversation with staff and with other students. You'll be supervised, but ultimately this is something that you will execute yourself, and it will be the pinnacle of your work here with us. So alongside those compulsory courses, you also take 3 optional courses, and it's important to say that the ones listed on these slides is just a suggestion of the sorts of things. The actual offering changes a little bit year on year. It's also a lot bigger than this slide makes it look, because we've tried to pick the fantasy kind of specific ones, but you can in principle do courses from a much wider range of options offered by the entire school and indeed the college. Most of our students, though, go with the ones that are kind of designed for fantasy students. We've got fantasy across media, which is sort of transmedia exploration of what fantasy does in different formats, whether that's TV or film, but also board games, video games, TTRPGs, things like that. There's a children's fantasy literature course, which speaks for itself. World building, which is the one I run, and surprisingly enough is about building of worlds. A course run by our medievalist colleagues, looking at the deeper prehistory of fantasy in the medieval period. And lots of our students too choose to do a creative writing option. That's not a fantasy specific course, but many of our students are interested in the writing of fantasy as well as in the reading of it, and so that's important for them as well. Important to restate that this is just a selection of what we offer, and it's correct at the moment I make this video, but we do change these offerings year on year. The way we teach will be familiar to you if you are doing your undergraduate degree in the UK, although if that's the case, you might be expecting more lectures than we have. It is almost entirely, we do have a couple of lectures still, but it's almost entirely small group seminars and workshops is how we teach. So by small group there, that's usually between 10 and 15 students. And if you're less familiar with the UK education system, what that means is you and other people who have read the text or done the work for that week, sitting in a classroom talking about it for usually 2 hours. Some seminars are slightly shorter than that. The point of the seminar format is really that we're all learning from each other. I consider myself one of the learners in that room when I'm leading those conversations. And so we are sharing our knowledge and love of the fantasy genre and developing together different questions to ask about it, questions that we might then pursue separately in our own individual research and writing. That individual research and writing, as I said before, is building to the dissertation, and that's where we do have a bit of one-to-one supervision. But it's really important to stress that this is, like most master's degrees in the humanities in the UK, this is a program that's really designed to develop you as an independent scholar, and you'll be doing a lot of work in the library and in your own workspaces by yourself as well, in kind of developing your approaches. We've got an extracurricular program that is tied to the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic. We're really proud of that. We consider that community a big reason to come and study with us. It's one of the main reasons this is an in-person program. So I'm going to turn over to Dimitra now, and she's going to say a little bit more about that.
As students of the Fantasy MLitt program, you will also have the opportunity to take part in a number of different activities organised by the Centre for Fantasy and the Fantastic. This is our research centre on fantasy here at Glasgow that brings together researchers, PhD students, all of you master students as well as collaborations with stakeholders outside academia, including writers, creative practitioners more generally, artists and fan communities as well. So the centre organises a number of different public-facing events, conferences and other opportunities that students can get involved with. The centre does far too many things that I cannot really list here in detail, but one thing I want to draw your attention to is our annual conference, Glasgow International Fantasy Conversations, or GIFCon, which is run by postgraduate students, and MLitt students are very much involved in it and often present their first paper. This is an international conference. We've had keynotes by amazing writers such as the ones you see on this slide here, Amal El-Mokhtar, Marjorie Liu, Shia Jha, and many other academics as well that come and present to us. So this is an opportunity to get involved with a conference already in your year here with us. One more thing that is worth talking about is what our graduates have got to do after they finished with this program with us, and it's absolutely lovely to follow their trajectories and their career paths. So we've had alumni that have gone into many different areas of work or of research. We've had students who've gone into teaching. We've got students who have gone into the heritage sector, including museums and galleries. We've also had a lot of students that have been involved in the publishing industry, including as editors and agents. And there's also a portion of students that want to continue with the research that they've started here with us and have gone on to do PhDs, either here with us at the University of Glasgow, and they're now part of our centre community, or in other universities all over the world.
It's really, really difficult in a presentation like this to put across the love that we have for this programme, for its students and for the subjects that we get to talk about. Something that separates fantasy criticism perhaps a little bit from wider literary criticism is that its practitioners tend to feel a bit more personally involved in it, tend to have fanish aspirations or tendencies of their own, even while they're capable of, as most fans are, having intense, deep, critical conversations with the subject matter and with the people who write it. None of that comes across in a presentation like this, but it is the key thing about working here, and it's why it's such a joy. The last thing to talk about just before I go is how you apply. The full details for this are on the website, and perhaps you've already seen them. From my perspective as admissions tutor, there are two bits of the application that are particularly important. The first is a personal statement. It's not particularly high stakes personal statements, but what we're looking for in that is to give you an opportunity to tell your story about why you want to come and study with us. It's really important to us that we get to know our students as individuals as quickly as possible. This is not a big program. It's usually about 20 students in a year. So we do forge quite close relationships with most of the students who come and do it. The more important thing, though, is the academic writing sample. And by far the most common question I get about this is about whether the academic writing that you submit has to be about fantasy. The answer to that is no, it doesn't. We recognise that worldwide not every undergraduate programme gives its students an opportunity to write about fantasy literature for assessment. What we want to see is not that you can write about fantasy, but that you can write academic prose. So we're looking particularly for skill with a referencing system, with an ability to pursue an argument rigorously, to write clearly and cleanly. Those are the skills we need you to have already. If you've got them, you're almost certainly coming here. So that is how it works as far as we're concerned. You don't have to prove that you're already an expert in fantasy. That, if you like, is what we're for. Or if you've got something about fantasy already, by all means, let's see it. But what we're really looking for in that admissions process is to make sure that you have the academic writing skills that you'll need to make the most out of your time here. There's one thing more that it's worth saying. Although criticism and writing in fantasy are often very close together, as I said earlier in this slide, they're not the same thing. Every year we get a few applications from people who seem to think that this is a creative writing degree, a degree that's going to teach you how to write fantasy. That's not quite what we do, although the skills we teach, I think, are useful to aspiring fantasy writers, and many of our students are aspiring fantasy writers. This is not something where you'll be, for the most part, writing and submitting creative work. This is a critical degree. It's a literary criticism master's program. So with that in mind, if we're sounding good to you, please do send an application to me. I'm really excited whenever one hits my inbox, and hope very much to hear from you soon. The central admissions team have all kinds of ways that you can find out more, hear more about this process, and they're all displayed on the slide here, and I recommend every single one of them. It's also worth saying that you're welcome to email me individually. You can find my email address on the website if you have any specific questions about the program or your suitability for it. I'm pretty good at replying within a few days mostly, so reach out and get in touch if you're interested in applying for this program, and I hope to hear from you soon.